obviously a lot of seniors in there. You know, out of respect for those guys, just want to make sure to spend some significant time with them. And ultimately, I would tell you it's important that all parts of our organization, in particular the players, and really emphasize that with our other guys, that we spent time telling those guys what they've done for the program, their example, their approach. There's some really special players in that group that have not only been productive on the field, we also had a lot of guys that worked their tail off throughout the week that maybe never get to play, right? They have contributed to our team in a major way. So, yeah, that's always a tough time. I do want to compliment the crowd tonight. I thought our fans were fantastic. I mean, we continue to sell out these games, and certainly not only that, but their impact, right? I thought they were a factor tonight, and we're very thankful for that. No doubt it was special in there tonight, over 90,000. We continue to do that, and I think that speaks to the place. You know, this place has impacted a lot of people, and certainly we're thankful for them showing up tonight, doing their part. You know, I think that you know, when we look back at the last couple of weeks, you know, we have the lead in the fourth quarter multiple times. You know, and I think when you're coaching a team, you know, that has the makeup of this team this year, there's got to be, we have to use this experience. You know, there's a ton of players in that locker room that are going to be back next year. And look, we haven't been able to finish. That's the bottom line. And I think we're learning how to do that. We've been in position to do that. But ultimately, I think as we build a team that's made up of veterans, it's going to be important that we, at some point, you know, the old adage, you fall down 7 times, eventually, you know, the 8th time you get up and you finally get it done. I think at some point, this group, the experience that they got this year will pay off, right? And I think they get to go into this offseason with that experience, and that affects their entire attitude and approach to training, to practice, and certainly, you know, as you build another team dynamic, I'm hopeful that this group, you know, learns how to finish. And once we do that, I think there'll be a ton of momentum opportunities that come with that. So, you know, I'm thankful for this team, regardless of what anybody else says, okay? This team was a special team for a lot of reasons. You know, their ability to continue the resiliency, the toughness, and I'm not just talking about physical toughness. This game requires mental toughness, emotional toughness. It requires work. It requires investment. It requires sacrifice. And I think this group has continued to show up with a really good attitude and do their part to prepare. And then when the ball's put down, they've played with effort, toughness. We need to play with better detail. We need to execute better. There's no question about that. But I respect this group, and there's a lot of individuals in that locker room, man, that are made of the right stuff, you know. And I don't want to lose sight of that just because our record this year. So, you know, ultimately, we got to get up off the ground, you know. And I think we have to learn from failure. And growth comes through struggle. I think this season presents that opportunity. And look, we have work to do. You know, ultimately as a staff, you know, we have to evaluate where we're at, you know, from top to bottom, every inch of what we do. And we have to work hard to try to position the players and do better, right? I think that's what I'm consumed with. That's my purpose. And that's the way I view my platform, opportunity. The coaching profession is about the players, right? And doing the absolute best job we can do for the players to position them for success. and certainly football. That is on the field, but it's also everything that you do throughout the off season, and certainly how we can impact who they are as people and as students. So, we'll have an opportunity here. Players will be off tomorrow, and then we'll begin kind of a process Monday to Thursday. As we kind of, turn the page and move forward here. What questions do we have?
Some conservative decisions in the first half when you had the lead, when you had a little bit of momentum and you had the lead. How much of that was a byproduct of, Max and the state of the offensive line, or do you wish you could have taken more shots at times?
Yeah, no, I think, there's no question. I think that we'll be able to look back at this thing and say, hey, maybe we should have taken a different approach. But at that point, defensively, we were really humming, right? I think we held them to like 85 yards in the first half. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers were, but they were struggling to move it, right? Obviously, the environment was a factor. They've got a young quarterback out there as well. So, and look, Max, I think he did his part. There's a handful of plays that he'd like to have back, and I can certainly do more to help the players. I think when we look back at it, there's going to be, whether it's a sack in the red area or a holding penalty right before the half, that contributes to the outcome, right? I think so. Florida State's got a really good defensive team, and they made their plays, but we also contributed at times. There are things that we can do better.
Yeah, Billy, the fourth quarter just kind of got away from you guys a little bit with discipline and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you kind of
discipline?
point?
What specifically are
Well,
we
50 yards of penalties. And
yeah. I agree.
Yeah. But what do you kind of point to with that?
Yeah, I think it's a team that has, I think that tonight it was a handful of decisions or a handful of execution opportunities, missed plays. It's been a little bit different each week. I think a number of things contribute. But, the penalties, obviously, those are things that we need to address. There's no excuse for those. I think some of those were technical and some of those were decision-making. I think a lot of things contribute to the result. But we've been in the fourth quarter with some really good football teams here the last couple of weeks. We've got to learn how to finish those games. There's no question about it. We have to coach better and play better.
Well, you say evaluating every aspect, and that's a very involved process. But where do you start with something like that?
Well, we have a we have a pretty exhaustive process that we go through each year. Whether we're undefeated and win championships, or we're sitting here where we're at as a program, right? So we're going to go through our process, right? And there'll be some things that come from that, right? And I think ultimately we do it each year, independent of the result or the outcome. And we're obviously trying to improve our systems and do what we think is in the best interest of the players. Ultimately that's our job. So that's what we're going to do.
Coach, the record from year 2 is worse than year 1. What do you see from your team or from the people in the program that there has been progress made and that you're still heading in the right direction?
Well, I think the youth in particular, I think, and look, I think it's important that we all understand that, we'll have a good nucleus of players coming back that have significant experience next year, whereas, evaluate the roster going into this year. I think that's important. I think look at the teams across the country that are having success. They have veteran football teams, right? They have a number of players that have been in the program for a number of years. We need to do that, right? We need to retain players. We need to continue to add quality players, and then we have to get better in-house at teaching, developing all parts of what we do. So that's what we're going to do. I think, we already have players in that locker room that are talking about getting to work. So I think that's an indication of a group that's much like they've competed, to be quite honest. I think they'll take that attitude and approach into the offseason.
Billy, you said a couple minutes ago that the defense was kind of humming in the first half. What changed in the second half? Anything you guys did differently, they did differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think they had 200 total offense, 224 yards, something like that. So, I mean, I think ultimately they got a touchdown on the first possession of the second half. You know, in the 4-minute situation, they popped the run to score the second touchdown, right? So, you know, I mean, I think we had opportunities to get off the field on third down. We didn't. You know, I think in the first half we did get off the field on third down. Made them play a lot of third downs. They converted, you know. But ultimately, I mean, I think we did a lot of good things on defense. When you hold a group to 224, you know, I think there's a lot of positive.
Billy, you talked about how your players are hurt and everybody. How about you? How do you handle 2 seasons like this in which you've had so many close calls, et cetera, like that?
Well, I think, you know, I view ultimately what motivates me is doing the best I can for our people, right, for the staff and for the players, you know. And, you know, I would tell you that this was 6 years as head coach, and we've had varying levels of success and failure. But ultimately, that's always the motivating factor for me, right, is doing my absolute best for the players and the staff. And look, I think we anticipated this being a challenge. You know, I mean, I think that we felt like it was going to be a challenge going in, and then when we got here, we realized we were in for a battle, right? And I think we're in the middle of that process. I have a tremendous amount of confidence, ultimately because of the people that I'm around every day, right? And that group of players being at the core of that. I think I maybe would feel different if we didn't compete, if we weren't in contention, if we weren't in the fight. You know, we're playing into the fourth quarter with some of the better teams in the country here down the stretch with a group, you know, that we all understood going into the year didn't have a ton of experience, right? So, you know, we're in the process of rebuilding the roster. We're in the process of learning how to make it work at the University of Florida, you know. And we're brought here for a reason. There's no denying that we have work to do, but I think what gives me confidence is what I see from the players, the growth I see, their words, their actions, the way they work, the selflessness, the sacrifice, their investment, you know, and I think everybody likes to use the word buy-in, you know, but I think for me it's more about action. And I think I've seen a ton of action from players, and not just how they compete on game day, but also I'm with them every day. So regardless of what anybody else says, I don't really care, okay, because I know the young men in that locker room, and I've got confidence and belief in that group. So, you know, you fall down, right? I mean, this is much like many of you have fallen down in your career at times. I mean, our young people, they came up short, you know, and they got to get up off the ground and learn and adapt and evolve and grow. And it's hard, right? But ultimately, I think we all can agree that a lot of the growth and improvement that we've been through in life came from some of the tougher times, right? And I think it's important for me to set a good example for them, right? Because I think ultimately that's what our young people need.
Are we going to finish with Jacob and Zach and 31 each, guys, please? Just relative to that challenge and the rebuild process, do you feel like you guys are maybe where you wanted to be, where you expected to be through 2 years? Are you hitting the benchmarks that you wanted to be hitting by this point?
Well, I think ultimately the record is what it is, right? But I think listen, there are things that, without question, okay, I think that we can do better, right? And I think we made some adjustments year one to year two. We need to continue to make adjustments. I don't know that there's an answer to that question, if that makes sense. You know, I think we're fighting every single day, right? We're trying to get a little bit better each day. And look, I think this is a very fluid dynamic, you know, relative to what we're trying to create and build here. So I've got belief in the players. That's what I would say. I've got belief in what I've observed from that group. Because ultimately, that's what, when we have a veteran team that takes complete ownership, you know, that's ultimately when we'll have the best opportunity to field a contender and eventually a champion.
Billy, when you spend the next few weeks evaluating your program and your staff and any changes you want to make, how do you have to, you know, weigh the youth that you have on the roster and maybe some areas that aren't where you want it to be, injuries and stuff like that, when you're evaluating things with your staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to remain as objective as possible. You know, I mean, I think ultimately, you know, because look, I think we work together as a team each day, you know, and I think we do have good morale, chemistry, camaraderie, whatever you want to say. It's one of the reasons why our team plays the way it does. But bottom line, we have to produce, right? We have to develop, we have to improve, and we all have responsibilities, you know. There's all parts of the organization where you're in leadership position, people have been entrusted to you, roles have been entrusted to you, and, you know, this is a production business, right? So, you know, I think you try to remain objective in terms of how you evaluate that. Certainly youth does contribute to that, but ultimately there's a lot that goes into each and every decision that you make, right? So it's the challenge of leadership, right? So, and there'll be some of that. There's going to be some of that, you know, and I go back to games about the players, right? And we owe it to do the absolute best for the players. What's in the best interest of the players? You know, the young people you've been entrusted with, that's the ultimate responsibility, right? So creating an environment where they can grow and develop as people, students, and players, and a lot of people contribute to that. So that's what we're going to do.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Thanks, guys.
Right.